In this video, we're going to talk about a warm-up routine for the right hand on the classical guitar. So we'll start with right hand walking. Then we'll have a brief discussion of Guiliani's 120 right hand exercises. And then we'll talk about rasgueados. So let's start by taking a look at right hand walking. So you'll start with the index finger of your right hand playing the low E string. And we're going to start with right hand walking by playing the low E string, and then with the same finger playing the A string, D, G, B, high E, back to B. And for all of them except for the low E string, I like to use a rest stroke. Because the low E string, there's no string adjacent to it towards the ceiling, so you have to do a free stroke. The rest stroke, we're just going to push through the string and come to rest on the next string. And it's really important that once you come to rest on the next string, that you don't keep the pressure going. At that point, you want to relax your finger and bounce back so you're ready to play the next string. Then you can repeat the same process with the middle finger. Does not have to be fast. And then last but not least, the ring finger. For most people, the ring finger is their least fast, least strong finger of the right hand, so this is a great way to develop that a little bit. It's also just good for warming up your fingers. Once you've done each finger individually, then you can start to go back and forth between index and middle. So we're going to start with the index on the low E string, and then play the A string with middle, then D string with index, G with middle, B with index, high E with middle, and then come back in a similar way. I like to practice starting with index and then practice starting with middle. So you get a good way to practice those different string crossings. If you want to get really crazy, which I know you do, right? You can dot the rhythm. So what that means is to go da, da, da. That way it forces you to do those two notes, da, da, nice and quick. Start with middle, do the same idea. You don't have to use every single one of these ideas, but these are just some ideas to get you going. You try the same thing, a little more difficult, with middle and ring. And then last but not least, you can use your thumb. To get your thumb going, so you have that feeling of going this way and then coming back towards the ceiling. That's a little more difficult. That's really good for developing this part of your thumb where your thumb connects to your wrist. So doing all the strings open. So now that we've warmed up with right hand walking, we can take a look at Guiliani exercises. We're going to keep it really simple. There's 120 right hand exercises written by Mauro Guiliani. So that's a lot to cover. So we're going to cover just the second exercise and the fourth exercise. We're going to use the thumb, P, index, I, and middle, M, and we're going to play an ascending arpeggio, and then we'll play a descending arpeggio. So let's start with the ascending arpeggio. So the sound is going up. We're going to play the A string with the thumb, and then index and middle are going to always play the B and the high E strings. So we're going to start with the C major chord. That's the way that we do it. Like the Guiliani exercises, he's written those out with a C chord as the first chord, and then a G7 over B. It sounds so fancy, but it's actually not that difficult to play. So for the C, we have the third finger on the A string, middle, I know you can't see my left hand, but then the middle second fret, G open, B string first fret. And for the G7/B, put your middle finger on the A string second fret, G is open, put your pinky on the B string third fret, and then your index finger on the high E string first fret. So we can go back and forth. I like to start with those. You can use any chord combination that uses a 5-string chord, so that uses the 5 strings closest to the ground. So we're going to start by playing the thumb on the A string, index on B, and then middle on high E. What we want to do is have a triplet. So we're going to go one and da. So triplet, triplet, triplet. So the index and middle always stay on the B string and the high E string. The thumb is going to move by playing the A string, D, G, back to A, then we switch, repeats the A, go to that next chord, that G7/B, A string again, D, G, back to A string, and then back to A string. What's great about this is we're going to keep the index and middle, going to keep those on the same string, and we got the feeling of the thumb really moving, as I was just talking about in the right hand walking section, really moving from that back, that big joint, so it's moving back and forth to reach the string. These fingers, you don't want your hand to be jumping around or moving around. You want your hand to be very secure and very solid. We can think of the two fingers as almost like they're going down at the same time. This is called planting. So we plant on these two strings and we peel off the index finger and then the high E string, and then the middle finger on the high E string. Make sure that after each finger plays that it just returns to that relaxed state. So your finger wants to automatically come back to that state where it's just like hanging like this. It takes effort to keep it in like this. So we just keep it hanging like this. That's the feeling you want to develop. Now if we go on, let's go to exercise number 4. There we're going to do the very similar thing, but we're going to change the pattern a little bit. We're going to start with the bass note once again, on the thumb on the A string. But now we're going to start with the middle finger on the high E string first, and then come to the index finger on the B string second. You don't have to go fast or anything like that. I don't actually use a metronome when I practice that much for these because I like to warm up. See if you can go nice and steady. So we go. Now here what we're going to do is a thing called sequential planting. So we're going to put the notes down in sequence, the fingers down I should say in sequence. We play the A string, and I like to think of it as a weight transfer from the thumb to the middle finger on the high E string right after that, and then to the B string with the index finger right after that. Once again, I'm keeping the middle and the index very steady and very secure over the high E string and the B string, and the thumb does the motion from that big joint as it reaches, goes from the A string to the D, to the G, back to the A, repeat the A to D. I think this is a great way to do number 2, which is the ascending. And then do number 4, which is the same pattern, basically the same rhythm, the triplet rhythm, but descending. Either way, it helps you develop your hand. As I said, the Guiliani exercises, that's a huge subject in of itself. It can be a little overwhelming, so I think this is a great way to get started using this in your practice routine. This will really help your arpeggio playing. Okay, let's look finally at rasgueados. This is something that classical guitarists don't play as much, but I think that classical guitar playing really benefits from this both musically and then also technically. Be careful that you don't overdo this. This is something that's kind of intense. This is really good for developing strength, but you want to make sure that you don't overdo it and you don't want to cause any pain in your tendons or your muscles over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our wrist is nice and straight. I like to anchor my thumb on the low E string, and with the index finger, we're going to shoot it out like this. I'll do it on an E chord just so it sounds cool. We're going to shoot it out, and then we're going to bring it back in like that. So the main thrust is from that big knuckle joint. We're shooting back and in. When you come back in, sometimes people get caught up on that. They have like too much of a claw or something like that. Make sure that when you come back in, that those interior joints are nice and loose. And they actually have some give. Like those are gonna like bend backwards. The main thrust is gonna be from here. What's so great about rasgueados is that we're gonna develop this part of our hand where it shoots our fingers back out. When we're playing pieces like the arpeggio studies and things like that, we're always kind of bringing our hand in toward the palm. So here we're really developing in a very conscious way that idea of extending the finger. That's something we don't get a lot of practice on, and that's really good for developing strength. So make sure that you don't have any pain. Make sure your wrist is nice and straight, that you don't have any pain. If you feel any pain, you should stop and take a rest, but you're really gonna feel it in this part of your hand. I wouldn't overdo rasgueados. I would do maybe 5 minutes at the most and then definitely take a break. So after you did your index finger, you do your middle finger next. last but not least, you can use your ring finger. It's a great warm-up because once you feel that, it's going to feel nice and strong, and you'll feel kind of like it's the same thing as exercising. You'll really feel that kind of like feeling that burn, you know, in your hand. Just make sure it's not painful. So I like to do that, to do each finger individually. Next we can do is we actually do the thumb. So I actually want to start the thumb on the high E string, believe it or not, and we're actually going to do a motion up towards the ceiling. You really feel that, once again, I'm saying this a lot, but you feel that where it's connected from your thumb, where the big joint is connected to the wrist. And you can think of it a little bit of like turning your wrist to help you get all 6 strings. You're turning your wrist like this. And so now we're going to put them together. We're going to do this. We're do our last thing here. We're going to do it on an E chord. We're going to go thumb up towards the ceiling. So we're starting the high E string, going towards the low E string. And then we're going to do the ring finger, the ring finger, middle, and index. So we're doing. That's if we do it fast. If we do it slow. So what we want to do when we're doing the fingers is you want each finger, like I have the A finger out. When I do the M, the middle finger starts to come back in, and when I do the I, the middle finger comes back in. So that basically the fingers they're not staying out like this, like they're not staying extended. What they're doing is they're kind of like, once they've had their turn, they're returning back to that relaxed state once again. Your fingers just kind of naturally want to hang like this. They don't stick out straight, they don't make a fist, they're just hanging like this. So, and it's actually not so hard to do. Don't stress about like you have to get perfectly like, when you do your A finger, your middle finger has to perfectly come out and this has to come in. It's not like that. It's more of in a natural way. This is really good for developing all the fingers in your hand, like developing that strength once again. You'll definitely feel tired after you're doing it for just like a minute, so don't overdo it. I like to do it like on an E chord. So I like to do like 4 pulses, like 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the thumb is going to be on the beat. So it's like da 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 da. As I mute the strings here. So see if you can incorporate that a little bit into your warm-up routine. See how your right hand feels as you start to do the rasgueados each day. As I said before, make sure you don't overdo it. 2 or 3 minutes is actually totally fine. It's more about the intensity of getting that motion of extending your fingers. Now that you know these 3 different approaches, see if you can incorporate them into your daily practice routine. Let me know in the comments below which technique you like to practice the most. And be sure to subscribe because I'll be making more classical guitar lesson videos in the future. Thanks for watching.